She sent him to a cheap motel, only to discover that the next morning he had bought out the entire hotel. The lobby of the luxurious Sterling Heights Hotel in Santa Monica was abuzz with activity. It was a Friday night, and the atmosphere was buzzing with the energy of eager travelers arriving. The sound of suitcases rolling, the sounds of guests' cars, and the soft murmur of conversation echoing off the polished marble walls. This was no ordinary hotel. Its grandeur was impressive. Palm trees lined the entrance, and a chandelier that cost more than most homes glittered in the center of the lobby. Behind the reception desk sat Rachel, a confident but tired middle-aged woman who had been through a busy day. She had spent the last 12 hours dealing with guests, last-minute reservations, and the occasional angry customer who swore their reservation had been lost. Tonight, Rachel was in no mood for any more surprises. His uniform, impeccable this morning, now showed signs of a long shift, and his patience was at its limit. It was into this controlled chaos that the doors to the lobby opened once more. A man entered, unforgettable at first glance, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt that had seen better days. He carried nothing but an empty milk carton slung over his shoulder. The man stood, scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. His appearance barely moved. Guests continued their conversations, and the staff moved with purpose. He was just another late guest, but there was something about the way he carried himself. His casual posture didn't match the nervous energy of the other last-minute guests. He exuded a quiet confidence, as if the busy world around him was just background noise. The receptionist noticed it too, but not because of his calm confidence. Instead, it was his unkempt appearance that caught her attention and inspired her judgment. Rachel glanced at the man as he approached the counter, suppressing a sigh. She could already feel her irritation rising. In her experience, last-minute arrivals were usually a nuisance. Either someone trying to get a room at a better price, or a weary traveler who wouldn't take no for an answer. And judging by the look on this man's face, she thought she knew exactly which category he fell into. "Good evening," the man said, his voice calm and unexpected. "I'd like to reserve a room for the night, please." Rachel forced a smile, the kind that barely reached her eyes. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked for the night, sir," she replied, her tone brusque but modest enough to remain professional. She tapped away at the keyboard, pretending to confirm what she already knew. The man didn't react immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with a curiosity that made her uncomfortable. "Fully booked?" he asked, his voice calm. "No rooms available?" Rachel pulled back, sensing a possible argument. "That's right. We've had a very busy day and all our rooms are taken," she said, gesturing toward the lobby full of guests as if that would reinforce her point. "There's a motel a few blocks away. They might have availability." His words hung in the air, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of amusement cross his face. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He pulled back slightly, watching her. "No cancellation? No options?" he asked, his tone devoid of frustration, just curiosity. Rachel felt her irritation rise. Why couldn't he just accept her answer and leave? "Sir, I don't think this is the right place for you," she said, her voice dropping to a more condescending tone. "Like I said, there's a motel nearby. They'll probably have something that fits your situation." Her eyes drifted to his t-shirt and jeans. The implication was clear. This was no place for someone like him. The man walked away. His expression was now unreadable. For a moment, Rachel thought he might argue, but he simply smiled and pushed away from the counter. "Thank you for your time," he said, turning to leave. He walked to the lobby seating area instead of the exit and sat down in a chair with a clear view of the reception desk. Rachel couldn't help but glance at him every now and then as she continued her work. What was he doing? Why hadn't he left? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye, but she quickly dismissed the thought. Her job was demanding enough without worrying about random guests who didn't belong there. However, something about the way he sat, calmly observing, made her uneasy, but she tried to ignore it. As time passed, Rachel tried to shake off the strange feeling of being watched. The man hadn't moved from his chair, his eyes occasionally sweeping the lobby but often landing on her. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just another guy who wouldn't take no for an answer, nothing more. Yet her frustration grew with each sideways glance. As the clock struck 11 p.m., the lobby began to quiet down. The crowds of guests thinned, leaving Rachel with a more manageable workload. She felt a momentary relief, glad that her shift was coming to an end. The thought of finally sitting down with a glass of wine at home was the only thing keeping her going, but her relief was short-lived. "Excuse me," the man said, approaching the counter again. His quick approach startled Rachel, though she quickly composed herself. She masked herself with professionalism, or at least what was left after a long day. "Yes," she said, her tone harsher than she intended. This time, she didn't bother to force a smile. "I'm sorry for bothering you again," he said, his voice calm and composed. "But I couldn't help but notice that some guests seem to have just checked in. Are you sure there are no rooms available?" Rachel felt her patience running out. "Sir, I already explained this to you," she said, crossing her arms. "These guests had reservations, so they had rooms. I don't know what else to tell you." He nodded, looking thoughtful. "I see," he replied. "And if I wanted to make a reservation for tomorrow night, would that be possible?" Rachel hesitated, surprised. "Tomorrow?" she repeated. "Yes. Is tomorrow available?" he asked, his voice still calm. She sighed, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she checked the system. "We have rooms available tomorrow," she admitted reluctantly. "But I don't see what difference that makes to you tonight." "It doesn't matter," he said with a small smile. "But it's good to know." Rachel's irritation grew. Her tone sounded almost enigmatic, though she couldn't quite fathom why. "Look, I don't have time for this," she said, her voice louder than she'd intended. "If you don't have a reservation and you can't stay here, maybe you should stop wasting our time and go to that motel I mentioned." The words hung heavy in the air. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flashed. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile before turning away. "Understood," he said simply. Without another word, he returned to his chair in the corner of the lobby, his composure intact. Rachel felt a pang of embarrassment, but quickly suppressed it. He wasn't her problem. She had done her job and that was that. Or so she thought. But the way he watched her, silent and composed, left an eerie feeling she couldn't ignore. As the minutes turned into hours, Rachel continued with her work, but she couldn't completely ignore the man in the corner. He didn't cause any disturbances. In fact, he barely moved. He just sat silently with an air of calm that somehow seemed unsettling. Every now and then, his gaze would move to the reception desk, as if he were mentally cataloging every detail. Rachel tried to convince herself that it didn't matter. People were in the lobby all the time, whether they were waiting for transportation, meeting friends, or just killing time. But the man wasn't fiddling with his phone or flipping through a newspaper. He was just watching. At one point, she caught sight of him watching a young bellhop trying to maneuver a large stack of suitcases. The man stood up and, to Rachel's surprise, walked over to help. With a few quick adjustments, he showed the bellhop how to better balance the stack, earning a grateful smile from the concerned employee. Rachel watched the exchange, intrigued. Who was this guy, anyway? Playing the Good Samaritan didn't change the fact that he was wasting her time. But as the evening wore on, she noticed other things, too. The man seemed interested in the little details that most guests overlooked. He watched the concierge patiently deal with a frustrated couple who were making demands. He noticed the cleaning crew removing smudges from the ice doors moments after they showed up. And he saw Rachel answering a simple question from a colleague about the reservation system. Every time he looked at her, his expression was unreadable. It wasn't judgmental or angry, just thoughtful, as if he were solving a puzzle. When midnight came, the man finally stood up, slinging his milk carton over his shoulder. Rachel felt a rush of relief. Maybe now he would be gone and she could stop feeling like she was under a microscope. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said, his voice low but deliberate. Rachel just stared at her computer, muttering a good night as he walked toward the exit. But just before he passed through the revolving doors, he stopped. Turning, he looked around the lobby, the immaculate walls, the glittering chandelier, the staff working silently behind the scenes. His gaze settled one last time. Then, with an almost knowing smile, he left. Rachel felt a strange mix of relief and tension that she couldn't quite identify. Little did she know that the events of that night were far from over. The next morning, the staff at the Sterling Heights Hotel gathered in the conference room for an inaugural staff meeting. Rachel walked in, still carrying the fatigue from the night before. Meetings like this usually meant policy updates or reminders for service upsells. Nothing exciting. She sat in a chair near the wall, scrolling through her phone until the manager arrived. The room filled quickly, and an unusual buzz of energy ran through the team. There were whispers of a special announcement, though no one seemed to know what it was. Rachel glanced around, noticing that even the senior staff seemed unusually alert. Something was definitely different. The door opened and the manager, Mr. Calloway, walked in. His confident stance was amplified by the presence of a man following close behind. Rachel straightened in her chair. It was the same man from the night before, the one she had dismissed and sent away. He stood there, looking tall and composed, dressed in a smart suit that was nothing like the casual clothes and jeans he had worn earlier. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Calloway began, his voice cheerful but professional. "I hope you are all well. We have a very special guest with us today. Someone who has taken a great interest in the operation of this hotel." Rachel sat up straighter. Was this some kind of joke? Had this man returned to make a scene about how she had treated him? Her heart pounded as she sank deeper into her chair. "May I introduce Mr. Elon Musk," Mr. Calloway said, "the new owner of the Sterling Heights Hotel." The room fell completely silent. Every eye turned to the man Rachel had so harshly dismissed the night before. He gave a small nod to the room, his face calm but carrying the same knowing look he had the night before. Rachel felt the breath leave her lungs. Elon Musk? Had she humiliated Elon Musk, the hotel owner? Her mind whirled as news of the previous night's encounter replayed like a nightmare. The man she had assumed was just another desperate guest now stood before the staff as their boss. Elon stepped forward, his hands clasped calmly in front of him. "I've always believed that the true heart of any business is its people," he began, his voice measured and thoughtful. "That's why I like to see things for myself, without filters or special treatment. Last night, I had the opportunity to observe how this hotel operates, from the incredible teamwork of the bellhops to the patience of the concierge. I saw much to admire." He paused, letting his words sink into the room. Then his gaze shifted to Rachel. She felt a chill run down her spine as he addressed her directly. He didn't say her name, didn't call her out explicitly, but the weight of his words was unmistakable. The room was silent, the tension so palpable it could have been cut with a knife. And yet, as Elon continued, it became clear that he wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but to deliver a message that would resonate deeply. And yet, as Elon continued, it was clear that he wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but to deliver a message that would resonate deeply. The air in the room was heavy as Elon's words drifted away from the personal. Rachel felt the weight of his gaze pressing down on her, her pulse quickening. He hadn't called her by name, but the way his gaze lingered, steady and deliberate, left no room for doubt. She looked down at her hands, afraid to look up and meet anyone's eyes. Elon continued, his tone firm but not accusatory. "In a place like this, where people come expecting the best, how we treat them defines their experience. And sometimes even small gestures, a smile, a little patience, can make all the difference." He paused, looking around the room, his gaze lingering. "I want to make one thing clear. This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about growth. Every person in this room has a role in the success of this hotel, and I'm here because I believe in the potential of all of you." The team murmured in agreement, even as Rachel remained silent, her thoughts racing. She couldn't stop replaying the way she'd spoken to him the night before. The dismissal, the condescension, it all seemed so bright now, so avoidable. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Starting today," Elon added, "I will be working closely with management to ensure our team has everything they need to succeed. That includes training, support, and, yes, accountability. We owe it to ourselves and our guests to maintain the highest standards." The room erupted in polite applause, and Elon gave a small nod of thanks. As the meeting adjourned, the team began to disperse, buzzing with animated conversation. Rachel stood up from her chair, her feet feeling like lead. As soon as he managed to muster the courage to stand up, he felt a presence beside him. Looking up, he saw Elon. His heart almost stopped. "Rachel, isn't it?" he asked, his voice calm but direct. She swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A genuine smile, almost reassuring. "I know yesterday was a long day for you," he said. "It's not easy being on the front lines when things get hectic. But remember, every interaction matters. People notice how they're treated, even when you think no one's looking." Rachel nodded quickly, unable to find the right words. I understand," she stammered. "And I'm very—" Elon raised his hand, gently interrupting her. "No need to apologize, just learn from this. That's all I ask." With that, he gave her a small smile and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The meeting, the revelation, his words, it all swirled through Rachel's mind like a storm. For the first time in her career, she truly understood the weight of her actions, the impact they could have. And in that moment, Rachel made a silent promise to herself to do better, not just for the guests, but for her own growth. As Rachel left the conference room, she felt a mix of emotions: shame, guilt, but also renewed determination. Elon's words echoed in her mind, not as a rebuke, but as a lesson. She realized that her behavior, even if born of fatigue, was not justifiable. Every guest who walked through those doors deserved kindness, regardless of appearances. Over the next few weeks, Rachel made a conscious effort to approach her work differently. She greeted every guest with a genuine smile, even when she was tired. He took time to listen rather than jumping to conclusions. And slowly, he began to realize the impact. Guests responded kindly, colleagues became more dependent on her, and work that had once felt like a rush now carried a new sense of purpose. The story of the mysterious owner became a whispered legend among the team. No one knew when Elon might return, but the possibility kept everyone on their toes. For Rachel, the encounter wasn't about fear of being watched. It was a reminder of the kind of person she wanted to be. She no longer saw her job as just a paycheck, but as an opportunity to make small, meaningful differences in people's lives. The lesson she learned that day was simple but profound. Never underestimate the value of kindness, and never judge someone by their appearance. You never know who you're talking to or the impact your words might have. And so, as Rachel became a pillar of excellence at Sterling Heights, the moral of the story became clear. Being kind costs nothing, but the rewards can be life-changing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring and resonant stories. Thanks for watching and see you next time.